This is Raw 12:51 a.m. and welcome to the Warwick F1 show. We're back. It's my turn on air. Of course, I'm Jack Rowe, and I'm joined, of course, by my regular co-hosts. We'll start with Will Kingswood. He hasn't had the chance to be the encyclopedia of Formula One yet, or he won't this week because it's Formula 2. How you thinking about that?
Yes, you are correct. I will find a way to get F1 stats in here.
Okay, all right. And we've got Chinmay back with us as well. How are you feeling? Second show last week, how was it?
Yeah, it was alright, not too bad. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of fun doing this whole thing now.
Good. And we've got a couple of first-time guests as well with us. So we've got Nick. How are you feeling about this?
I'm feeling good, yeah. I really enjoy F2. I've been watching it since about 2017. Yeah, me and my younger brother. He's probably the one who's more knowledgeable on F1, but he doesn't go to the uni, so you've got me
why not?
instead.
Drag him in next week.
Yeah.
And we've got Bethany with us as well. Have you into your F2 or not really?
Hi, nice to be here. I'm not massively into F2, but at the same time I do enjoy watching it when I do. I remember I watched it quite a lot in 2020 because of you-know-what, but yeah, I haven't watched it as much recently. I didn't watch it as much last year, but I am hoping to watch it more this year.
Yeah, so we will get onto that later in the show, and we'll also do our predictions later. But I think the first thing we have to talk about is, and we talked about news for the last 2 weeks. It's been a bit of a pain in the arse, but immediately after we recorded the show, again before I'd released it, we had all this drama about the Haas, about Russia and Nikita Mazepin. So obviously we'll talk about the environment first. Russia's invaded Ukraine. A little bit of a scary time for everything. I mean, what does that mean for F1, Will?
I mean, so the Russian could they stop dropping news on a Thursday? It's really inconvenient.
Yeah, it is.
But the Russian Grand Prix got cancelled. I think that was the first thing that happened on, I want to say Friday. Yeah, so that race is gone now. They're looking to replace it, I think, with probably Turkey.
It's always. I think Turkey's rumoured, but they've never said anything about it. That's just where the backup race is.
I mean, I think because Russia was near, I want to say Singapore in the calendar, so Malaysia could also be an option. Then we've got to the point where just today, actually, so the FIA said that Russian and I guess technically Belarusian drivers as well could participate, but under a neutral flag. But then the British government, or I think the British Motorsport Association, have come out and said that they won't allow Russian or Belarusian drivers to drive or to compete in the UK. So even if Mazepin does remain in his place in the team, he won't be allowed to drive at the British Grand Prix. That's
an interesting one. I didn't know about that. So we'll move on to the main protagonist in this saga. And Haas. So on Thursday it was the testing, and we had them immediately removing that Uralkali, that branding, and from the website it's gone as well. What did you think about that, Chinmay? Was that just a reactive move, or was that like premeditated? If they removed it permanently?
I think them removing the livery was obviously a reactive move to the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, but I do feel that it might become a permanent move where Uralkali would no longer sponsor Haas, and we'll have to see if Haas do make any changes to livery, or they do keep this plain white livery, which I kind of hope they do keep because it actually does suit the car. I will not lie, but yeah, I think this whole Uralkali sponsorship will definitely permanently be gone, and I'd probably want to see Mazepin staying in the seat, to be honest, maybe because of visa issues.
And what do you reckon, Nick? Do you think Haas has got a real big future in F1, or are they going to be really limited for the next year or so?
Well, yeah, we did kind of see in the Drive to Survive series that they were really short on money, and the Uralkali kind of sponsorship deal gave them a lot of that cash that they were lacking, and now that is going to be gone. Obviously, it's removed from the car. We've got the plain white Haas car, and all these sanctions and how the Russia-Ukraine conflict is going. It doesn't look like it's probably going to be ending soon, so I think Haas are going to find themselves in a bit of a sticky situation, and that really isn't good for the team. Like, they were already in a bad enough situation financially, and I think maybe with the kind of with the news around Andretti, a fellow American kind of team that did want to get into F1 but seemed to have been kind of rejected, they might try and kind of take control of that Haas team at some point in the near future.
Yeah, we have. We did briefly mention it. That was a little bit before the show last week, so that was nice. But yeah, that does put a new spin on things. I'm gonna ask Bethany the really tough question: have the FIA handled this in the right way? Is there something they should be doing better, or making harder actions on it? Do you think?
I've had a look at it myself, and to be honest, I don't see much of what they've done that will impact anything at all when it comes to F1. Like, as far as I can see, nothing's going to change. So, in that kind of sense, apart from the cancellation of the Russian Grand Prix, they've pretty much done nothing, and that I don't feel like they've done enough. It's not this whole situation, it's not Nikita Mazepin's fault, but I do feel like, unfortunately, they do probably need to make a bit of an example and just, at least for now, just flat out ban Russian and Belarusian athletes from participating in FIA motorsport.
Yeah, it's a rough one, isn't it? I think for all we can argue about what's right and what's wrong and what the FIA should be doing, what governments should be doing, I think what we need to do as F1 fans is bear in mind that it's not just our sport that's affected, that is, an entire country, and we're going through some rough times in Europe, and I hope that everyone agrees with me that we think about Ukraine and do our best here we can in the UK to make sure that the least people come to the least amount of harm as possible. So with that, we're going to take a music break. This is Blossoms with Ode to NYC, and then we'll be back and talk about the slightly more cheery Formula 2 2022 season. And welcome back to the Warwick F1 show, where we're going to talk about the 2022 Formula 2 season, which of course kicks off at Jeddah, at Bahrain, with the F1 season, and then goes to Jeddah, which was what I was going to say originally. Now what I'm going to do for this segment is I'm going to pick one of my guests at random, or myself, and I'm going to get them to choose a team and try and defend why that team's going to win. Or pick a driver from that team who you think is going to win the World Drivers' Championship and say why, and then defend why that team's going to win the Constructors. Say why that team's the best in Formula 2, okay? Are you all happy with that? We ready?
Yep.
Good. So, let's get the random number generator up. Here we go. And we've got 4, so that's Will. All right, Will, you got first choice.
Oh, I'm going to pick Prema then. Obviously, Prema have always been the F2 team of choice if you were going to go for a winner. Like, I know it's a spec series, but spec series, especially at this high level of motorsport, aren't necessarily as equal as they may first appear. Dennis Hauger, obviously the winner of the F3 championship last season, wrapping it up in Russia. And they've got Jehan Darivala moving, I think, from Carlin into Prema. Obviously, a good move for him, especially if perhaps he wants to get into a seat into the future. I think it'll be interesting to see how Yuki Tsunoda in particular does. Because obviously, Darivala, Liam Lawson as well, could potentially have a shot at the championship and potentially a shot at that AlphaTauri seat. I could see Hauger winning it out of the two of them. I think he had
Piastri, the F3 and the
yeah, I think he had an incredibly impressive season last season. Obviously, sometimes maybe it takes a bit of time to go up into F2. I think Piastri was probably the exception rather than the norm, and once again it's an outrage that he's not got an F1 seat this year, but I think it's not going to be like a Callum Ilott where he might never get it. I think his time will come, especially maybe once Fernando Alonso retires and he could move into that Alpine seat. But I think Hauger over Darivala. I think Darivala has had some good performances, but maybe not quite at that high level. And I think Hauger, the way he drove in F3 was immense. And I don't see, obviously, at the moment, I don't see why that can continue.
Okay, Will's got Prema. So was that going to be anybody else's first choice, or no? What do you reckon, Nick? Was your first choice or not?
Well, I might have gone with Prema. They are they're the easy choice.
All right, we'll go for the next one then. So we've got number 3. So 1, 2, 3, and it's Bethany. Which is your pick?
Well, I was kind of thinking about Prema, but I didn't want to go for the obvious choice. So I actually went for ART. So ART have Frederick Vesti, who, if I remember correctly, is a Mercedes junior driver,
Yeah, I think so.
and he's got 2 fourth places in Formula 3 in the last 2 seasons, so he's a good, decent driver. And they've also got Théo Pourchaire, who was runner-up in the Formula 3 Championship in 2020, and then
I think he was 5th last year in Formula 2.
I'm just looking. Yeah, he was 5th
Okay.
last year in Formula 2. So I do think they've got 2 talented drivers who are ready to make that step up and really fight for the title. Less so Vesti than Pourchaire. I do feel like if one of them was to win, it would be Théo Pourchaire. But I do feel like they've genuinely got a shot.
Okay. What do you guys think about that?
I'd say pretty much, I'd agree with that. ART are a very strong team. Théo Pourchaire is a very young driver. He was, I think, 17 when he won his first race. He's a very young talent, and Vesti is Mercedes kind of academy driver. And I've always he's had a few seasons in F3 now. I really think it was long overdue that he had the opportunity to step up.
Okay, so we'll go for the next one, and we've got... Oh, it's me. Right, we're going for the people on this side of the room. So I'm going to go with high tech, I think. So I'm looking at Yuri Vips personally. He wasn't... Whether he's a rookie or not last year is a different, is a difficult question, because he had that half a year in Formula 2 in 2020. But he stepped up towards the end of the season last year. So I don't think he's going to do a show and just stagnate. I think he's going to step up it big time this year. I think he was 6th. Someone's going to have to fact check me on that, but I think he was 6th last year. But no, I could definitely see him winning the title this time around. Marcus Armstrong, I'm a little unsure of. I thought he was going to be really big last year. He came from F3 and he didn't really do anything. And again, at the last race of the season, or the last round of the season in Formula 2, he stepped up big time. So we'll see what happens with those two, but that's my bet. And we'll get the last one of those two. Random number. Nick.
Right, I will go with Carling Racing. They were previously kind of bigger name in F2. They obviously they were the car that Lando Norris got into F1 with. I believe he came second to George Russell in that F2 championship. But this year they have Liam Lawson, a Red Bull Junior, came 9th last year. I really rate Lawson. I think he would be the one to win it of the two. He didn't do too well last year, but he was had a lot of reliability problems. I seem to remember in Monza he retired. In a lot of other races there were issues, and that I think overall contributed to the fact that he ended up 9th. I think he could have done much better if the car hadn't broke down on him. And the other driver is Logan Sargent, fresh from F3. He was a Prema driver. He finished, I think, 7th. He's Williams Academy. He's really decent. He's been in F3 for good kind of 2 seasons now, I believe. And no, I reckon he could kind of score a top half finish this year.
Yeah, and Sargent recently became a member of the Williams Driver Academy, I think, as well, right?
Yes, he did.
So that's nice for him to have some back in there as well. Of course, he's got the hopes of America on his back. And then we've got Chinmay. You got the rough pick. What have you got left?
I'm going to be honest, and I'll say they won't go for the Constructors' Championship. Probably drivers through Jack Doohan. I'll go for UNI Virtuosi. Because I think Jack Doohan, like Hauger, he didn't win, but he also had he was a vice champion last year in Formula 3 as well. And he's a son of 5-time, I think he was a 5-time MotoGP champion, Mick Doohan. And I think he can definitely come through as a force to be reckoned with next. I won't lie, I'm not really I won't have high confidence in Mika Sato. Bear in mind the fact that he's literally scored 2 points in 2 seasons of Formula 2, which kind of is not good in any way. But I do feel that at least with the
not good in any way. Kind of not very good.
To be fair, I think he was driving for Trident, who aren't the best.
They're not that bad. All right, sorry. I'll let you keep going.
But then I think constructors, not so much, but probably at least with the drivers, then Jack Doohan could be a dark horse. we'll see.
All right, so there we have it. We've got Prema and who picked next? Bethany, what did you pick again? Oh, can't remember now. ART, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got so Prema for Will, ART for Bethany. It was it was High Tech for me. Carlin for Nick and Virtuosi Racing. Are they still you and I? On Wikipedia it says Virtuosi.
They must be Virtuosi.
Okay.
now.
All right. Well, they've dropped that. That's nice. Virtuosi Racing for Chinmay. Okay. So we'll throw it to another break now, and then when we come back, we'll talk about some of the more interesting, some of the stories that are there, some of the storylines going into the season that aren't just those who's going to win it kind of ones. Before that, here is Master Plan by Tears for Fears. That was Tears for Fears with Master Plan, and we're back with the Warwick F1 show talking about the new Formula 2 season, because we're going to do our Formula 1 preview in week 10. So you've got to make sure you stick around for that. Will's looking very excited for that. But until we get there, we'll talk about F2. So we're going to talk about the new addition to the grid. Not in terms of drivers, because of course F2 is an absolute cycle for drivers, which in some ways makes it really good, in some ways is a little bit of a put off for some people. But we've got a new team on the grid, Van Amersfoort Racing, replacing HWA. And I'll throw it straight to Bethany, I think. What were HWA like in both Formula 2 and Formula 3, because they're replacing them in both?
Yeah, so HWA Race Lab, they joined Formula 3 in 2019, joined Formula 2 in 2020, so they didn't really last that long. Formula 3, they were a pretty midfield team. They managed to get 4 wins overall in Formula 3. And ended up 5th, and then 7th. So, decent midfield team in Formula 3. Formula 2, they struggled to get points at all. They got 22 points in 2 seasons, 10th and 11th, so they were just a complete backmarker team. So, it's understandable how they just completely left Formula 2 considering their poor results. Formula 3 is slightly more surprising. From what I can see, they're not involved in any kind of FIA motorsport at all now. So that's kind of interesting, but yeah, they sold up and their assets have been bought by Van Amersfoort.
Yeah, so Van Amersfoort ran a race. They ran a team in all the different smaller formulas, the regional Formula 3 and Formula 4. Them buying that gave them that in. Did we need that 11th team on the Formula 2 grid? We have 10 for Formula 3, and they're almost the same teams. There are some small changes, but is it better to have a regular, or is it just like get as many teams in there as possible, Nick?
I think if you have more teams, it's going to give obviously more opportunity for the drivers to move up, and with the kind of reliance of a lot of drivers rely on the money to get into these series. I mean, we talk about Van Amersfoort Racing. You've got, I think it's Cordial, who came 21st in F3, but has somehow managed to make it into F2. And yet there's drivers who have, I believe one of them, Victor Martins, he was definitely 5th or 6th last year, and yet didn't make it into F2, which I think is a huge shame. So I think if you did have kind of an extra team, you got the more teams, maybe you'd get those drivers that, robbed of the opportunity this year, would have got the opportunity.
All right, let's talk about that. In every season in Formula 2, there always seems to be that 1 or 2 drivers that are just so bad. We've seen, of course, the most amusing Formula 2 driver ever, Mahavir Raghunathan. But we've also seen drivers like Sean Gallale, and last season Alessio Zileda, who drove for HWA Race Lab. Do you think Van Amersfoort stepping in, is that raising the ceiling of Formula 2? Is that going to make things a little bit less reliant on those poor drivers, Chinmay?
I don't think so, to be honest. I don't think it'll make much of a difference. A team like Van Amersfoort coming in, there's only going to be legends like Raghunathan coming into Formula 2. You're not going to stop that from happening, especially with how expensive it is for teams just to survive. Even forget Formula 1, Formula 2 is something difficult for someone, especially lower midfield to the back market teams, just to survive in the sport. I mean, we saw that I think HW Racing had slight issues with financial, so they had to sell out and they couldn't sustain Formula 2 as much as well. It's because I didn't see much of a feature in it. So I don't honestly think it'll make much of a difference.
Yeah, so we saw Jake Hughes step into the HWA car in Formula 2 last season. Matteo Nannini choosing to step back to Formula 3. He was doing both. Aitken came in for one or two, but Hughes was the one that raced in there for a handful of races as well, and he's in the car for Van Amersfoort Racing next year. So is this just an extension of HWA? I mean, with a nice new black and orange livery, I think it stands out. It looks great, but is this just a different? Is it basically a name change, or do you think there's going to be a real step up from them?
I think I don't know enough about sort of when they came in, because obviously you've got to do car development and stuff. You've got to develop and improve the car. If they've come in too late, then it's probably more likely to just be a name change. If they've come in early enough, then there is that potential to improve. But I think you're always going to have those teams at the top. I think even though, like I was saying, it is a spec series, like you're always going to have Prema, Carlin, High-Tech, Virtuosi up there. And 11 teams, I think, is a good number. That seems to be what F1 is pushing for. Realistically, if they allow Andretti into the sport, that's 11 teams. Maybe we go up to 12 if the Volkswagen Group ever decide to enter one, and then maybe back down to 11 if Haas drop out of the sport now, obviously with the whole situation going on. I think aiming for 10 to 12 teams in F1, in F2 and F3 is always a good option to go for, and if it does require some teams to make up the numbers, then so be it. I think in lower series you've just got to look at teammate performance. It's especially in teams that aren't nearer the top. Mm-hmm. You've just got to compare it teammate to teammate, because realistically that's the easiest comparison that you can make in these formulas, where obviously some of the rules are different as well, and you're not necessarily going to be on pole if you qualify first in some of the races.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of people who might not be in pole, I don't know, maybe that's quite harsh, but we've got, for the first time ever, an F1 esports driver stepping up into the official F1 feeder series, in Cem Bolukbasi, who drove in the F1 esports series 2017 to 2019, and then from there went and embarked on his own career. He drove in, see if I can remember, I think it was Formula 4 European, first off?
Yes.
Oh, GT4. It was GT4 European Series. And then he went to F3 Asia last year, and now he's stepped up to Formula 2, skipping out Formula 3 entirely. How much of that is money backing, and how much of that is talent? Nick, do you know much about him?
I did kind of follow the F1 esports scene for quite a while. My younger brother is, as I say, he's kind of the more knowledgeable one on most things F2, but he's also very much into his sim racing. So this is kind of a big thing for the sim racing community in general, to see how a sim racer will do in kind of going from that the sim racing, going to kind of this GT4 Euro Formula, and finally into F2. And I think it's yet to be seen. Obviously, we'll find out. He's in the is it Charouz? Yeah, Charouz team. Yeah. So he's in the Charouz team, which is not one of the kind of stronger teams, but we'll see how he does in comparison to his teammate this year, and really see if he does have that. If it is just the backing, because he's got very, very strong backing from the Turkish motorsport community, and obviously the sim racing community as well. There's a lot of kind of financial backing there. But it remains to be seen whether he is the real deal, or whether he's just there because of the money. Yeah,
and he's only, I suppose, I don't know if only is the right word, but he's driven 30 races total in open wheeler, in both in the Euro Formula Open Championship, where he came 5th overall, got a couple wins, and in the F3 Asian Championship, where he came 9th overall, didn't get any wins or podiums. Is that enough? We've seen, of course, Kimi Räikkönen's the famous one, but also Max Verstappen, who drove only in Formula 4 and made that jump straight up. Is this what we're likely to see, or is he just going to be that back marker, Will?
I think it's worth giving it a try. Obviously, you've got I know Jarno Opmeer in particular is one I can think of where he tried to go for an open wheel career, but then the money sort of got in the way, then switched to esports and has done exceptionally well there, I think. And you saw that the race of champions as well. Who was it? Opmeer and someone else.
Rasmussen.
Yeah. Freddie Rasmussen. They drove against Vettel, Mick Schumacher, and I think... Oh, no, Lucas Blakely beat... Lucas Blakely beat Sebastian Vettel in one of the races. I think there is potential here for these esports drivers to give it a go. Maybe it won't work, maybe it does, but I think a lot of them will... I reckon there's a lot... There will be at least a few transferable skills from esports to F1, especially as there seems to be fairly good accuracy in the F1 2020 games, or the F1 2021 as we are on now. Like, it seems to be, especially I think Housemasters as well seem to be pushing towards making it as accurate as possible, and if the more accurate it gets and the more these drivers improve, then there's no reason why they can try. Obviously some of them might succeed, some of them might fail, but I think it again allows for another option on, I guess, the road to F1, and I think that's what we're seeing a lot more, especially with Liberty, because now, and the Americanization, because now obviously you can go maybe IndyCar to F1, which we might see with some of the American teams. You can go maybe esports to F1, you can go the traditional route. There's a lot of different options, and I think it can only be good for the sport.
Yeah, what's the prize money like for the F1 esports? Does anybody know?
I will Google it.
I bet it's not that much. Is the next step for F1 esports presenting the winning drivers a drive in a lower formula, or money to go do that, or something like that? Or is it just, should we leave esports as esports? Bethany, opinions on that?
It's an interesting one. I feel like, on one hand, esports should be its own separate thing, but at the same time, I do feel like at the same time, there should be the opportunity for the sports racers who do well enough, if they want, to be able to go and try and pursue a career in motorsport as well. The only thing is, with how young you have to be nowadays to be able to go up the ranks of motorsport, even with the fact that they had to put in that age requirement when Verstappen got in, for example, you could see how people getting into F1 were getting younger and younger and younger. And even though it's kind of stagnated to today because of that age restriction, it's still, the drivers coming in are very, very young. And as a result, I feel like, at least at the moment, the esports drivers just won't be able to get in. Like, I feel like Cem Bolukbasi is the exception that proves the rule, that they just wouldn't be able to achieve as much, unfortunately, just because they just haven't had as many opportunities regardless. So, yeah, I feel like, unfortunately, just the way things are at the moment, there just won't, as much as the esports drivers should get the opportunity to get into motorsports, it's very unlikely that they will be able to in the F1 side, at the very least.
Well, I think Bolukbasi's got a really big role in deciding how those esport drivers are seen by the world of F2, by the world of F1, by everyone. So he's got to step up this year, do his best, of course, and he'll be going for that. He'll be aiming for F1, like all of the drivers are. But it's really important that he puts in just a solid performance, I think. We'll be back after the break. We'll finish off our roundup of the Formula 2 season, and then we'll get these guys to do some predictions as well. Before that, here is Always, Always, Always by Youth Sector. Hello, and welcome back to the final segment of the Warwick. This is not the final segment. We've got two more segments. Sorry about that. We're going to talk about some small changes that happened to the calendar and the general format of Formula 2 in this season. So we saw last year, we went from those two races, one sprint race and one feature race per round, and then for cost reasons, it was there were fewer rounds, and more races per round. So we had two sprint races with both with reversed grids, and then the feature race on that Saturday. This season, we're switching back to what it was before. Chinmay, which is your preference, the 3-race one or the 2-race one?
Oh, easy, 2 races, man. I think they did a slight is the 3 race. I mean, especially with the 3 races, it was too much for one weekend, and there was such a long gap. I mean, especially with how badly last season, there's like a 2-month gap or something like that, just right in the middle of the season between races, and it was just weird. It's like you completely forget about what happened in the Formula 2 season. I just hate having to catch up every single time there was a new weekend. But at least now with 2 races a bit more spread out, we'll be able to see the drivers come together more in different tracks. I mean, the only thing would be is that there's a 2-month gap between, I think it was Monza and Abu Dhabi as the last 2 races of the season. But it's a lot better than what it was last year. Yeah, I feel it's definitely better that we've gone back to the old format pretty much.
Yeah, it's I think the issue is not necessarily the 3 races and the 2 races, right? It's what happens to the rest of the season. Does anybody disagree? Just like 2 races better just as a weekend as well, or?
Yes, because it is.
Oh.
It's way more simple. Like,
who cares about simple? It's F2.
No one understood the 3-race format. It was like you were qualifying in 7 different positions at each race. It didn't make sense. And like, there are going to be more races. It exposes the drivers a lot more because there's more opportunities. That, let's say you miss the race at, I don't know, Sochi that happened last year, you could still watch the one at Jeddah, for example. But like, there's more opportunities for that this year. Like you mentioned, 2-month gap. I would imagine that will be filled at some point because of, obviously, I think Russia was meant to go during that gap, and obviously with what's happening, that's been cancelled. So I would assume they would go somewhere, like maybe America. Actually, don't mind. I think they'll put a race in that gap, because I think even Liberty are beginning I think now Liberty have come in, they'll have solved the sort of the money issues, I guess, or they'll help provide support more. And I think everyone just thought it was a good idea to try, I think, the 3-race thing, but I think that in the end it just didn't end up working.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I just like more racing. I think maybe that's where it's at. But this season we're seeing more races than ever. We've got 13 races on the calendar. Of course, one was the recently cancelled Russian.
Would have been 40.
Yeah, I was going to say one was the recently cancelled Russian Grand Prix. So we were due to have a total of 28 races over the season. So interestingly, in the lower divisions, kind of a 15 or a 30 race season are the standards. But of course, that's not what we have in F1. Would you rather see longer and longer seasons and maybe a little bit more issues with money, or would you rather see these compact seasons, maybe see F2 and F3 alternating it at each race? Nick, have you got any thoughts on that?
I think, as we briefly mentioned, the F2 teams have enough kind of financial issues as it is. I think, although extending the kind of the calendar, having more races, having kind of longer seasons, would be brilliant for the kind of the viewers of F2. It's already a very exciting series. But at the same time, you've got to think about the teams. You've got to think about how they could cope potentially with those financial issues. You had HWA having to leave the sport because of those financial issues. So
yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think what we're going to do is we're going to throw it to a quick music break, and then we'll come back and we'll do our normal 2022 F1 predictions. So, anything else to add about the Formula 2 season? Are you hyped for it?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I was just looking at calendar. One thing I noticed, actually, it's literally just Europe and the Middle East that the races are at. I've noticed. I didn't actually realise that until now. So that's interesting. But yeah, I am very, very excited about it, and yeah.
I imagine that's to cut down on costs again, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I'm excited for it. It's going to be good racing, no matter what. We know that it's Formula 2. Can't wait.
Honestly, it's in some ways it's more exciting than Formula 1. Here is Jolene by Dolly Parton, and then we'll be back for some predictions after the short break. And And we're back on Raw 12:51 AM for the final segment of the Formula 2 recap, which has nothing to do with Formula 2 at all. We've got our guests Bethany and Nick on, so what we're going to do is we're going to do our little prediction game for next year. So I've explained it to these guys, and hopefully by episode 8 of the series, you shouldn't need any explanation for yourself. So we're just going to kick things off straight away. World Drivers' Champion, Bethany, go.
Lewis Hamilton.
Okay, a lot of people have said that. Are you going to double down on that for the constructors?
No, I'm saying Ferrari.
Oh, interesting. You guys have got the slight advantage, haven't you, with the testing just last week? Most drive of the days.
Ooh, that's a difficult one. I'm going to say Verstappen. It seems like the easy choice.
Okay, a lot of people have said Russell, so that's the... Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, Nick, same questions. Drivers' champion.
Max Verstappen. I'm a Red Bull fan.
Okay, constructors?
Ferrari, yeah.
Okay, people like the Ferrari, and most drive of the days.
I'm going to go with Pierre Gasly.
Wow, alright. Thoughts on that, the Will and Chinmay?
Why not?
I'm just bitter they've got an advantage. They know, because it's Ferrari and McLaren are looking good.
Yeah, but Mercedes set the 2 fastest times of the whole testing. So
we can't take testing.
Well, then don't take. If you
Yeah, but
can't take
I am.
testing,
It's
then
like-
Sandbagging.
They gave me numbers. I need to look at them.
if you can't take testing, then these guys have got no advantage, have they? So.
Well, we just know Haas aren't very good.
Yeah, well, I think anyone could have predicted that. So we're going to do it the quick fire round now. So I'm going to say a team. You're going to say which of the 2 drivers you think is going to win the most out of the qualifying battle. So again, we'll start with Bethany. You ready?
Yeah.
Good. Mercedes.
Russell.
Good. Red Bull.
Verstappen.
Ferrari.
Sainz.
McLaren.
Ricciardo.
Ooh, okay. Alpine.
Alonso.
AlphaTauri.
Gasly.
Aston Martin.
Vettel.
Williams.
Ooh.
Come on, this can't be that hard.
Latifi.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Alfa Romeo
Obviously Bottas.
and Haas.
Well, that's a difficult one, considering that it might not even be Mazepin in the Haas, but I'm going to say Schumacher anyway.
Oh, I've just realised what that
Good
means.
point.
for Will.
My prediction is now out the window if he did not get a seat.
I don't think you could have made a worse prediction.
This has gone really
We
badly.
thought it was terrible to start with,
It
and it could
somehow
have been
got worse.
literally impossible to be correct. All right, Nick, the same 10. Are you ready?
Yep.
Good. Okay, Mercedes.
Hamilton.
Good. Red Bull.
Verstappen.
Ferrari.
Leclerc.
McLaren.
Norris.
Alpine.
Ocon.
AlphaTauri.
Oh, this is hard. I like Yuki Tsunoda, but I'll go Gasly.
I think that's the right answer. Aston Martin.
Vettel.
Williams.
Albon.
Yeah. Alfa Romeo
Guan Yu Zhou.
and Haas.
Schumacher.
Okay, Zhou's an interesting one.
I loved him in F2, honestly. He was one of my favourite drivers. He always went on the aggressive kind of alternate strategy. I really rate Zhou. Despite
Okay.
what everyone says.
Well, that's a very nice way to end our F2 episode. We've got one more prediction, of course. So we've got our fun one. You pick one team and one race. Remember, not the top 4 teams from last season, and then you score that number of points. You don't have to guess the number of points, but you score that number that they score at that race. So Bethany, you got one team in one race.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a team that I think will actually be competing for the midfield, surprisingly. I'm going to go Williams Monza.
Okay, so that the Mercedes power at the power track, yeah.
Yeah, and Williams have always done well, especially last year, with tracks that have involved a lot of straight line speed and also not a lot of wind. Obviously, you can't predict the weather, but Monza is the epitome of a straight line speed track.
It is. Nick, have you got one team in one race?
Alfa Romeo, Azerbaijan.
Oh, Alfa Romeo. After all their testing troubles as well.
Well, you can always hope. They've got the Ferrari power engine, so if the Ferrari is good, usually the Alfa Romeo will kind of be good as well.
They've also got the best looking car dynamic.
Yeah, yes, they do.
I think the livery. I like the weird dish.
They've made the
Ferrari.
wheel covers interesting. Finally, one
Yeah.
team has done that.
Fair enough. So we got some slightly spicy picks from our guests, which was very lovely. So thank you very much, Nick and Bethany, for coming on. Thank you, of course, as well to my regular co-hosts, Chinmay and Will. I hope it's been all right this episode.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Been good.
And of course, thanks from me as well to you guys from listening. Just remember, you can check this out on Raw Sports Spotify or on the Warwick F1 Society YouTube. We'll be back next week with Will's show, I think, or is it Chinmay's?
We'll have to sort it out because we've got our big 2-hour special, week 10.
Yes. Tune in for that. Until then, we'll see you next time and enjoy the music. Goodbye.